This episode of the Therapy Unmasked podcast is brought to you by the Therapy Unmasked online courses. We currently have 3 subjects available. We have feeding, occupational therapy, as well as speech therapy, with physical therapy coming soon. These courses are taught by some of the best pediatric therapists out there, and they are teaching you the tactics that they use every day in their sessions. To find out if these courses will benefit you and your family, click the link in the description or show notes to find out more.
We're helping kiddos overcome anything that gets in the way of their daily activities. And children's main occupation is play. So anything that can interfere with their ability to play or participate in their typical family roles or maybe a school setting is anything that we would be qualified to work on. So really a very wide range of things that we see kiddos for.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Therapy Unmasked, here at Ability Innovations. And today is a pretty cool episode because we're going to be talking all about the student outreach program that we have here at Ability Innovations. So I have brought on Natalie, who's currently an OT student, and she's been here on one of her rotations working with us. And then Emily, who is an occupational pediatric therapist here and has helped Natalie a little bit with a few of the kids she's gotten to work with. So let's just dive right in, and we'll start with Natalie. Why occupational therapy?
Sure. So in undergrad, I actually changed my major 3 times. They were all in the health field, and I knew that I wanted to do something health related, but wasn't quite sure what that was until my first rotation at Shriners Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. I did a short 1 to 2 week rotation there before everything shut down during COVID. And that was kind of my first exposure to occupational therapy. I had never heard of it before and still didn't quite understand what it was. After that rotation, I just knew it was something I was interested in. And then the more I started researching it and the more experience and internships I got within the OT field, that I knew that was something I definitely wanted to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. So as a student, they have you do
the field work?
Yeah, so
sure.
You do a pediatric field work, and then you do what would you consider the other one?
Adults.
Adults or so which I have you done the adult one yet?
No, I haven't. This is my first level 2 rotation, my first 12 week in pediatrics. And then my school is a little bit different. We'll go back to an academic semester in the fall, and then we start our adults rotation in January.
So you haven't really done the adult one yet, but
No.
Have you been leaning more towards the pediatric side of things? Is that the career path you want to take? Or
yeah, I've definitely leaned towards pediatrics pretty much my whole life. I've loved working with kids. Even before I found what occupational therapy was, I coached gymnastics for a really long time and worked with kids from age 2 to 3 all the way up into high school, age 17, 18, graduated, and then was a part of that team during undergrad as well. So I felt like I have definitely a lot of experience working in pediatrics, and during this rotation here solidified that for me.
Gotcha. What about you, Emily? So you're also a pediatric therapist, occupational. What drew you in towards the pediatric side of things?
Well, I feel like kids are just so much fun and are full of energy.
Yeah.
And I love how, since we are so play-based, we can incorporate a lot of things that you would do just with your family or out on a daily basis, and then work on the necessary skills that the kids could progress in order to be more functional in their daily lives. And so I knew that I wanted to do something with kids growing up because I also had a similar background, not coaching, but just being around kids, like babysitting them. And then I was a registered behavior technician for a while. And so I was doing behavioral therapy with them, but I wanted to go more of the OT route because we have a little bit more of a holistic approach and kind of look at everything affecting their lives, whether it's sleep, participation in social relationships, things that could be affecting school, eating, just everything that you could think of. And I just thought that was so cool because life is just so good and we want to enhance as much as we can in being our most authentic selves.
That's super cool. Is Natalie the first student you've worked with?
Yeah, actually.
So, honest opinion, give us a review of Natalie and her skills.
10 out of 10. She has progressed so quickly, and it's really nice when you have students that are driven and motivated to learn and accept feedback and ask questions. And Natalie has done all of those things.
And I want to second that and say it's really nice to have a fieldwork educator who is also equally as driven and just like very open to problem solving with me and being like, okay, what did we learn? What did we do wrong? How can we improve from this situation? And I feel like it's been a really great experience here with Emily so far.
Aww. Okay, who was better, Emily or Erin?
I don't think I can say that on a podcast.
we won't show Erin.
Since I already passed my field work, I should probably say Erin.
He does have a lot more experience, so
no, I think it's also really helpful to work with two people and get two completely different perspectives. So it's really hard to just pick one person. You get to see that everyone has their own ways that they do things, their own ways that they come up with interventions and plan for kiddos and their own structure. And so it's been really great and helpful to work with one person for a few days a week and then another person the next.
So, because I know Erin does a lot more feed. Do you do the feeding as well?
I do not do feeding.
So did you have a chance to do feeding or?
We did a lot of feeding with Erin Monday through Wednesday. I feel like half the kids we saw were probably feeding kiddos. And that was something I have never seen in school before. We did a short little feeding clinic, if you could call it that, at school for a few days. But other than that, I didn't really have an idea of what feeding therapy looked like in a real setting and got to see a lot of that with Erin.
Gotcha. Is that something you're more open to doing in the future now that you've done it, or do you still want to stay away from the feeding?
I personally would like to stay away from the feeding. I think that it takes a specific kind of person to deal with the different textures of foods and exploring foods in different ways. And I think that's been a wonderful experience here. But I also found out that maybe feeding is not the route I want to go.
and that's okay, right?
Which is totally fine.
Everyone has to be obsessed with feeding therapy.
Right.
But just thinking about like your experience here at Ability Innovations, and Emily touched on it a little bit. We're a play-based therapy. In school, do they really tell you that there's a difference between like regular pediatric therapy and play-based? And so what was your like coming here? What were your expectations of knowing that we were play-based?
Yeah, so that was something that was touched on very briefly in school, but we really didn't have an idea of what that looks like, again, in a real clinical setting. There was a clinic that I briefly worked at in Georgia during my 2 gap years, and they were also pediatric outpatient, but with a totally different model. So theirs was definitely not play-based. It was just conducted in a different way. And that was really the only exposure I had to real life practices in pediatric therapy. So I didn't have any expectation coming here. I kind of just showed up and was like, okay, let me learn from my mentors, my fieldwork educators, and see how things are run here and go off of that. But after 12 weeks of being in the setting, I feel like the play-based model that Ability Innovation has is probably more beneficial than anyone else I've seen.
And for you as well, Emily, like when you first came here and got into this, like was play-based something you were looking for, or was it just something you happened to find?
Yeah, it is what I was looking for. I knew I wanted to be in a setting that you could be really, like you can easily adapt to things. And my clinical rotation was also very play-based, sensory integration-based, primitive reflex integration-based, things like that. So I had a lot of experience with the play-based setting, so that is kind of what I was looking for.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. So what kind of kids do you typically work with in occupational therapy? Like what are you helping kids overcome?
Yeah, so here, I mean, we're helping kiddos overcome anything that gets in the way of their daily activities. And children's main occupation is play. So anything that can interfere with their ability to play or participate in their like typical family roles or maybe a school setting is anything that we would be qualified to work on. So really a very wide range of things that we see kiddos for.
Do you remember my first week here when I was filming you, like following you around and stuff? And you were helping this cute little kid, like, and you guys went into that room and you pulled out this board game. And it was like the squirrel board game thing where you would pick up the nuts and like organize them by color, you know? So, and I kept thinking like, that is like so cool because he's learning so much. But in my mind, I'm like, I wonder why they picked that game with him at this certain point. So do you feel comfortable like talking about like,
Sure,
why do you pick the games you pick?
Yeah. So a lot of it is child-led and play-based. We try to incorporate the therapy within something that the kiddo's already interested in. Sometimes we'll pick out games as options and say, you know, do you want to play this or do you want to play this game? And this particular one that you're talking about has a lot of fine motor goals. So that was what that game was really targeting, was like identifying the colors and picking up with using pincer grasps to move the acorns from the board game into the, I don't know, the little tree trunk. There was also a pincher tool that you could use to help with just like overall hand strengthening, just any fine motor skills. So it's definitely very intentional. But then, you know, when you're a parent looking in or you're a kid actually engaging in the activity, they just really think that they're playing.
Yeah. And I think that's really the beauty of like the play-based approach, right? Is it kind of masks the therapy. With that and helping that kid, what were like your expectations like doing that? Like, did you believe it was going to work? Did you like, cause like you knew about play-based therapy, but you hadn't really practiced it too much. So when you do stuff like that, do you think is this going to work or is it maybe not going to work? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know, maybe you can speak to this as well, but a lot of it is definitely trial and error. The first couple weeks, it was difficult as a student to come up with interventions that were not just play, but also meaningful. And sometimes the lines can get a little bit blurry, at least as somebody who's still in school and someone who's still learning. But definitely after being here for 12 weeks now, I can see, okay, there's intention behind it. Now I know a little bit better of what games I can pick or what crafts we can do or this or that would be meaningful and create good results towards their goals.
One of the biggest things that we do within our interventions as occupational therapists, we called it grading up and grading down. So you have like a baseline of the idea that you're trying to, or the goal that you're trying to achieve. And we want the child to have a feeling of fulfilling or feeling like they're successful. And so if something is too hard for them, you're going to make it easier or grade it down. And that can just be modifying a simple way. So they're still getting it done. It may not be the way that you wanted, but it's a way that they're still getting those necessary underlying skills done. And then you can grade it up and make it harder and make it more challenging for them so that they continue to progress. So kind of like she said, it's all about trial and error and working together to figure out what worked.
I guess this is more of a question for you, Emily, but do you ever get pushback from parents on like the play-based approach, or are they pretty comfortable with how it works? Or do you ever have to like explain what you're doing?
I like to educate all parents on what we're doing and why we're doing and some things that it could be helping, because there's a lot of skills that you can work on that also affects other areas in life. So for example, like just being able to, like she was saying with the fine motor skills, picking up things with a specific grasp can then integrate into like a more scissors grasp or something, like opening and closing and working on scissors skills and coordination and things like that. So I really haven't got a lot of pushback from parents, but we want to address all that they have.
And I think another cool thing that our clinic does over other places is you let the parents come back if they want, right? And they can watch and see. Have you had any experiences with that? Or do you see parents mostly just tend to stay more at the front?
It's really just depends on the kiddo. Some parents and us as therapists agree that maybe the kid does a little bit better without their parent just because they require more attention from them, or they may behave differently, like, oh, are you watching this? Or just kind of like going back for comfort where we're trying to build that independence. So sometimes it's better to just be away, but we also want to educate and show them what we're doing in therapy so that they can do some of those things at home. So
Right.
It's kind of just a balance. We usually have very open communication, and we like to kind of do what the parents feel like.
I think that's the big thing too, is making sure that the parents have the opportunity to practice those exercises or those situations at home with their kids, because you want the parents to be involved.
Absolutely.
Because I know occupational therapy, like, I mean, feeding therapy does fall under it, but also we have like emotional like regulation, right? That's a big thing. What kind of stuff do you guys do in like a play-based setting to help kids recognize their emotions, maybe control those emotions? Like how do you go about that?
There's a lot of different curriculums that we like to follow. One of our biggest ones is the zones of regulation. And so it's about categorizing different emotions within different zones. So you have like the blue zone, the green zone, the red zone, and the yellow zone. And we kind of want to work on educating what these emotions look like, what they feel like, triggers that may cause these emotions, and kind of just really bringing about awareness to the emotions. And then once the child has that awareness, we kind of work on the ability to regulate their emotions with coping strategies. So we want to find ways of activities that they can do, or strategies they can use to make themselves feel more calm. And a lot of that goes hand in hand with that sensory regulation. And every single child has a different sensory system, because we all have our own neurological systems and the ways of how we process things. And so I love the fact that it's so individualized and that we can find what works for that specific child depending on all the things we talk about in our sessions.
Absolutely. I have done more emotional regulation for myself and the kiddos that we see than I think I ever have in my entire life. And that's something that was emphasized in the school, was like, be prepared when you go into any setting, there's going to be mental health. But it's different learning about it in a textbook or on a PowerPoint versus actually seeing it and carrying it through in real life. So that's been, I would say a lot of what we do, over 50%, is emotional regulation, just helping them be able to identify their emotions firstly, and then secondly, come up with coping strategies for them.
Have you enjoyed doing that? Is that like something you like to do? You don't have to answer if you don't.
No. I think it's very important. I wouldn't say that it's just neutral. It is what it is. It's part of our job as occupational therapists. I didn't realize there would be so much emotional regulation. So you definitely have to be creative in the ways you come up with interventions to address it, and try not to be repetitive and, saying these are the zones over and over and over again, because at the end of the day, that's not really going to be helpful. It has to be something memorable and meaningful in the specific kiddo's life. And like you were saying, every child is different. So really just coming up with things that are specific to that child is probably the most challenging part. But it has been mostly enjoyable.
That's good to hear. And that kind of leads into my next question that I wanted to ask, which is, because ability innovations, like it's on the wall. We cover everything from occupational, physical, speech, and feeding therapy. As a student, I would imagine that's pretty cool that you get to come here and like see, even though you're studying occupational therapy, you get to see all these different kinds of therapies, and you see how the therapists work with each other, because a lot of kids, they may need feeding therapy and they may also need speech therapy or physical therapy on top of that. So have you enjoyed being able to like interact with all these different kinds of therapies, and has it maybe changed your mind on like what you want to go into?
Yeah, absolutely. I have loved doing co-treats with other therapists. Mostly it has been OT and PT together, but there's been some times where speech crosses over as well. And it's just been really interesting to see what methods they're using too. And even if I'm not necessarily targeting speech goals, I can look at what the SLP is doing and go, oh, that's a really good idea. And I'm going to put that in the back of my brain and save it for my next session with my next kid that has similar goals. It's always great to work with other people and learn from other people, regardless of what discipline we're in.
What about you, Emily? Like, working here, what's it like knowing that you have access to all these other therapists and like working together and having kids that like see multiple therapists? What has that experience been like?
I love the collaboration because we do a lot of communication skills and social skills. And in order to do those things, you need to be able to use your voice. And so if I'm having difficulty with understanding a kiddo, or if they're having any speech delays, I can always go to the speech therapist and say, hey, what is your input on this? Or I love that they're just right there. And if I have like a more gross motor or physical concern that I may have more questions on, our physical therapists are right there. And we're always like really willing to help each other out and hear each other out. And that's what I love so much about this environment.
The collaboration, that's great. At this clinic, Ability Innovations, we kind of have really centered ourselves on the superhero theme. Like we like to theme ourselves as like the therapists are superheroes and we're helping these kids obtain their superpowers. But I want to know from you, like, what are some of the superpowers that you've obtained yourself while being here?
Maybe planning last minute or being able to come up with things on the spot has definitely been a skill I feel more confident and competent in by the end of these 12 weeks. When I first got here, I was like, oh, I have to have lesson plans and I have to write everything down, and every lesson plan has to be this long for every single kid. And by week 3, that was not even realistic. It's more of like, pick a couple of things that might work for this child, and then they could say no. They could want to do something different. And learning how to work on the fly and come up with alternate ideas that still target those same goals.
Right, because it is also like very child-led, right? So if you pick like dinosaur toys, for example, and you're like, I think we're going to try and play with the dinosaur toys today, but the kid says, no, I want to go play with the cars. Then you have to kind of pivot a little bit, right? Yeah, that's a good superpower to obtain, I would say, while being here. Well, what about you, Emily?
I feel like I've been so much better about, I guess, just being on my toes, and you're always in like I feel like my reflexes have just been like, things are falling and I'm like, because kids are running and they're running in front of swings. And so you're always just on your toes, just thinking about their overall safety, while at the same time just being there for the kid and making sure they're okay. So,
well, Natalie, we are very sad because this is your last day, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I'm so sad.
And you're headed home to Pennsylvania.
Yes, going back to Pennsylvania.
But you've told me before, you grew up like in a military family, right? So you've lived everywhere. Yeah. Would you ever come back?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Utah and maybe work at Ability Innovations.
I would absolutely consider it. I mean, I would never burn a bridge or say no to an opportunity. I think it's absolutely worth it to travel and see different parts of the country, and if that means going and working someplace for a couple of years, just and seeing what's around and going back home, there's nothing wrong with that. So
when it comes to like doing this student outreach program here, would you recommend that for other people? I mean, I know you would, but what like, because it was beneficial for you to come here and to like get that experience. So just kind of speak to that a little bit, like why Ability Innovations is good and how it helped you.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely recommend this as a fieldwork placement to any student. I was fortunate enough that my school already had this placement from a previous student from Pennsylvania who had come here last summer. So I kind of just was asking around about pediatric placements, ended up having military family here, and was like, oh, I'll try it out for the summer, and just absolutely fell in love with Ability Innovations and the play-based method and just the collaboration like we were talking about between all the different therapists. I would say it's different than any environment peds-wise I have ever worked in. There's, of course, other people in my cohort doing pediatric rotations right now, and they're at hospitals or clinics or schools. And I mean, very confidently, I could say that not any place they're doing is quite like this one. And it's just been very special.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for coming on. Before we end, I have one last question. We play with a lot of toys here. So what is your favorite toy?
Oh, no. You go first.
I have to think for a minute. I mean, there's so many.
There's so many toys. I like doing arts and crafts. So I would say the arts and crafts area. Or I also really have enjoyed playing with the food. So like some of the experiments that we do in the kitchen, we incorporate the little dinosaur toys
Yeah.
or the cars or the princess characters.
Or you guys make slime in there sometimes, right?
Oh,
In the
yeah. We make a
kitchen?
big mess. Big slime.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think I have a favorite toy, but I do love playing games with my kiddos. We work a lot with executive functioning and emotional regulation because it's really hard for kids to lose games.
Right.
And we have to be okay with losing sometimes. And that's,
I mean, you forget that sometimes, right?
You do forget that even as adults, we're all competitive. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to win.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the fine motor felt board. That's my favorite one.
I don't think I've
The
seen
felt
it.
board.
What is
Yeah,
that?
it's in the sensory room and it has little handles and then you open it up and it's spaceship theme, I think, or like
Okay.
space themed. And it has zippers and Velcro and snaps and buttons. It's not the most exciting thing we have, but I feel like it targets a lot of goals at once. And I try to get all of my kids to do it and they all say no. So.
Okay.
Maybe one day they'll
Maybe
say
we'll
yes.
see you playing with it by yourself.
Yeah, give it a
one of
couple
these
years.
days.
Oh, I
Come back
do
and try.
really love our rocket launcher. That is fun to jump on
Everyone
it.
says the rocket launcher.
The rocket launcher
You were like the
is
third
fun.
person that said that. So
I think we need a new rocket launcher now.
Mhm.
It's been overused.
It's on its last legs.
yeah. Well, cool. Again, thank you both for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I know our audience does as well. And like we mentioned, at Ability Innovations, we have a great student outreach program where we try and get students to come in here and obtain that real world experience in a play-based environment. So if you're interested, feel free to send us a message on Instagram, either at Ability Innovations or at Therapy Unmasked. Also, we wanted to just give a quick shout out to our new Therapy Unmasked website. I'll put it on the screen. We're currently offering 3 courses right now for feeding, speech, and occupational therapy, just to help give you a leg up at home when you're working with your kids, or maybe you're on a wait list and you need some extra like guidance and support while you're waiting for your therapist. So we have those resources for you as well. We also have tons of free resources at abilityinnovations.com. So feel free to check that out as well. Lots of free articles and stuff. And actually, Emily just wrote one that I think is published. I think we published it today. So,
Oh, yay!
yeah, I think it's up there today. So go read Emily's article. She worked
Primitive
really hard
reflex
on it,
integration.
actually. She worked really hard on it. Other than that, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.